Previously, we discussed the law on obligations and contracts under the Civil Code of the Philippines, which is a branch of private law regulating rights and duties between persons. We covered the concept and requisites of obligations, the different sources of obligations, which are law, contracts, quasi contracts, delegs, and quasi delegs, and the judicial nature of obligations as a necessity to give, to do, or not to do. It discusses the roles of creditor and debtor, examples of civil obligations, and various forms and classifications such as real and personal obligations. We also included the grounds for extinguishment of obligations through payment, loss, condonation, and others. We had an extensive section dedicated to contracts, including their essential requisites of consent, object, and cause, with detailed explanation of formation, offer and acceptance, the force of contracts as law between parties, effects of contracts, and interpretation principles such as special intent prevailing over general intent. We also addressed form requirements, electronic documents recognition, reformation of mistaken instrument, and protections against fraudulent contracts. Additionally, specific types of contracts like contracts of sale and lease are explained alongside smaller claims, estafa, and interest issues under Philippine law. On the latter part, we introduce concepts of rescissible contracts, their grounds, and the effects and remedies connected to contract rescission. Voidable contracts under the Civil Code of the Philippines are those contracts that, although valid and binding between the parties, are susceptible to annulment because of defects in the consent of one of the parties. Such defects include incapacity to consent, mistake, violence, intimidation, undue influence, or fraud. These contracts are not automatically void but can be annulled through proper legal action within a prescribed period. Importantly, voidable contracts remain effective unless annulled and may be ratified by the parties, thereby curing the defect and making the contract fully valid and binding. The legal framework provides mechanisms for annulling such contracts while protecting the rights and interests of the parties involved. This concept aims to balance contractual freedom with safeguards against unfair manipulations or mistakes affecting consent. Article 1390 states that certain contracts are voidable, meaning they are valid and binding unless annulled by court action under two main conditions. One, when one party is legally incapable of giving consent, for example, minor or mentally incapacitated person, and two, when consent is affected by mistake, violence, intimidation, undue influence, or fraud. For example, if a contract is entered into by a minor without the required legal capacity, that contract may be annulled upon proper legal action. Meanwhile, if someone is coerced through intimidation to sign a contract, that contract is also voidable. However, unless annulled, these contracts remain effective and can also be ratified by the parties. The law provides a protective balance, allowing contracts to produce effects while offering remedies to parties whose consent was flawed or who lacked capacity. Article 1391 sets a 4-year prescriptive period within which an action for annulment of a voidable contract must be filed. This period starts from different points depending on the defect of consent. For contracts vitiated by intimidation, violence, or undue influence, the 4 years begin when the defect or consent ends. That is when the coercion stops. For contracts involving minors or incapacitated persons, the period begins when the guardianship ends, meaning when they acquire legal capacity. For instance, if a minor entered into a contract that is voidable, the statute of limitations to annul it only starts once the minor reaches legal capacity or guardianship ceases. The law thus provides a fair timeline for seeking annulment while recognizing the parties' circumstances in which consent was defective. Article 1392 states that ratification extinguishes the action to annul a voidable contract. This means that when a party who had the right to annul a contract because it was voidable voluntarily approves, accepts, or confirms the contract despite its defect, they lose the right to later seek its annulment. Ratification can be either express, meaning clear and explicit approval, or tacit, which means implied by behavior. For example, if a contract entered into by a minor, which is voidable, is later affirmed by the minor after reaching legal age, the minor cannot later annul the contract because ratification extinguished the right to do so. Essentially, ratification cures the defect that made the contract voidable, making it fully valid and binding. Article 1393 states that ratification of a voidable contract can be made either expressly or tacitly. Express ratification is a clear and direct approval, usually communicated in words or writing. Tacit ratification occurs when a person who knows the reason that made the contract voidable and whose right to annul has not yet expired acts in a way that clearly shows they are waiving that right, even if they do not say so explicitly. For example, if a ward's guardian entered into a contract on behalf of the ward who is incapacitated, but later the guardian knowingly accepts benefits from the contract or takes action that confirms it, this would be a tacit ratification. Ratification removes the defect and makes the contract fully valid and binding from the start. Article 1394 clarifies that ratification of a voidable contract made by an incapacitated person may be done by the guardian on their behalf. Incapacitated persons include minors, those who are insane, or those otherwise legally unable to give valid consent. When such persons enter into contracts that are avoidable, it is the guardian who can affirm or ratify these contracts to make them fully valid and binding from the beginning. For example, if a guardian enters into a contract for a minor ward, which is initially voidable due to the ward's incapacity, the guardian's ratification validates the contract on behalf of the minor. This legal provision ensures protection and proper representation for incapacitated persons in contractual dealings, while allowing the preservation of beneficial contracts through guardian ratification. Article 1395 means that ratification of a voidable contract is a unilateral act done by the party who has the right to annul the contract, and it does not require the consent or agreement of the other contracting party who does not have the right to bring the annulment action. This means the innocent party alone can choose to ratify and validate the contract, thereby waiving their right to annul it without needing the concurrence of the party who may be at fault or who cannot challenge the contract. For example, if a contract was entered into with a minor, which is voidable, the minor may later ratify the contract upon reaching majority without the need for the other party's consent. This protects the innocent party's prerogative to decide the contract's fate. ensuring they are not thwarted by the other party's refusal to agree to ratification. Ratification effectively cures defects and makes the contract binding from the start. Article 1396 states that ratification cleanses avoidable contract of all its defects retroactively from the moment the contract was originally constituted. This means that once a contract is ratified, it is considered valid and fully binding as if it had no defects or irregularities from the beginning. For example, if a minor entered into a contract, which is voidable, of course, due to incapacity, but the contract is later ratified by the minor upon reaching majority or by a guardian, the contract becomes valid from the start. The ratification removes any legal infirmity, making the contract enforceable as if it were initially perfect. This principle protects the stability of contracts by recognizing ratification as a cure to past defects and preventing parties from later consenting the contract's validity. Chapter 7 will continue with Articles 1397 to 1402. Article 1397 provides that the action for annulment of contracts may be initiated by all parties who are obliged by the contract, whether principally or subsidiarily. However, it sets limits on who can claim annulment based on contract defects. Capable persons cannot use the incapacity of the other to annul the contract, and those who exerted intimidation, violence, undue influence, fraud, or caused mistake cannot base their annulment action on these flaws. For example, if a capable person contracts with a minor, the capable person cannot later annul the contract by alleging the minor's incapacity. Similarly, a party who committed fraud cannot seek annulment on the grounds of that fraud. This ensures fairness by preventing wrongful parties from abusing the annulment process while protecting those genuinely harmed by defects in consent. Article 1398 provides that when an obligation is annulled, the contracting parties are required to restore to each other's the thing that were the subject matter of the contract, along with their fruits, or such profit or benefits derived from the matter of the contract, and the price with its legal interest, except in cases where the law provides otherwise. In cases involving the obligation to render services, the value of those services serves as the basis for damages. For example, if a contract for the sale of goods is annulled, the buyer must return the goods and the seller must refund the price paid plus interest. If the contract involved services, the party who received the service may be liable to pay damages equivalent to the value of the services rendered. This provision ensures both parties return to their original positions as much as possible to restore fairness after contract annulment. Article 1399 states that when the defect of a contract lies in the incapacity of one of the contracting parties, the incapacitated person is not required to make any restitution except to the extent that they have benefited from the contract or the price received. This means the general rule of mutual restitution does not apply. The incapacitated party must only return what they actually gained. For example, if a minor entered into a contract and receives some benefit like money or goods, they must return only that benefit if the contract is annulled. However, if they did not benefit, they are not obliged to restore what they received, though the party must return what they received regardless. This provision aims to protect incapacitated parties from harsh restitution obligations while ensuring fairness by requiring return of actual benefits received. Article 1400 provides that if the person obliged by a court decree of annulment to return the subject matter of the contract cannot do so because it has been lost through their fault, they must compensate by returning the fruits they received and the value of the lost thing at the time of its loss, along with its interest from that day. For example, if a person coerced another into selling a car and then the car is lost or destroyed due to the buyer's fault, the buyer cannot return the car and must instead pay the value of the car at the time it was lost, plus any benefits derived from it, like rental income or use of value with interest. This rule protects the innocent party by holding the at fault person accountable for loss and ensuring equitable restitution despite the impossibility of physical return. The provision emphasizes responsibility for losses caused by fault in annulled contracts. Article 1401 provides that the action for annulment of contracts is extinguished if the thing that is the subject of the contract is lost due to the fault or fraud of the person who has the right to bring the annulment action. This means one cannot seek annulment while causing the loss of the subject matter to avoid restitution. However, if the annulment action is based on the incapacity of one of the contracting parties, the loss of the thing doesn't prevent the success of the action unless the loss was caused by the plaintiff's fraud or fault. For example, if X coerced Y into selling a car, Y can seek annulment. But if Y intentionally destroys the car, Y loses the right to annul because the loss was due to his own fault. This rule upholds the principle that a person must come to court with clean hands and discourages misuse of annulment rights through wrongdoing. Our last article for today. Article 1402 of the Civil Code provides that in cases of annulled contracts, as long as one contracting party has not restored what they are required to return according to the decree of annulment, the other party cannot be compelled to fulfill their obligations under the contract. This means restitution is reciprocal and conditional. Neither party is forced to comply fully unless both return what they must. For example, if a contract is annulled between J and Zola is required to return a statute by that J made, but J fails to return the money that Zola paid, Zola cannot be forced to return the statute until J returns the payment. So this protects parties from unfair exchanges and ensures that obligations are settled fairly and simultaneously. That is for today, and see you in the next.